At the outset, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. My screen is not moving. I'm just, yeah, now it is moving. Uh, for giving me this opportunity, and it is indeed a great joy to be interacting with the participants from worldwide. And so far, the experts have gave a lot of insight into the problem of hunger. And my focus is going to be more on hunger among children and how we can address it effectively. There's a lot of linkage between hunger, poverty, distress, and pushed migration, climatic change, health pandemic, which leads to child labor. As we all know, SDG recognizes ending hunger, achieving food security, and improved nutrition. And there is a linkage between this SDG and also 8.7, which speaks about elimination of all forms of child labor, particularly the worst forms of child labor. So I have put few facts. Uh, Child labor is a cause and consequence of hunger and poverty, because when there is hunger and poverty in the family, children are pushed into labor force. Then when children are entering into the labor market at an early age, then again they are into marginalized income, exposed to all kind of vagaries of weather and abuse, and they continue to be in poverty, perpetuating the existence of poverty. It also adds the climate instability. The recent years in India, we are facing Amphan, Nisarga, Nivar, which has really left many children without homes and their parents losing their livelihood. They have to spend days together in starvation and hunger. And the newspaper reports some of the children also died of hunger. This is again because of the historical injustice and denial of rights to certain sections of population, wherein centuries old denial of rights has kept some of the sections of a population impoverished. So, coming to the worst forms of child labor, this is ILO Convention 182 and the recommendation 190, which speaks of a new global cause. And it calls for immediate and effective action, because if the children are pushed into worst forms of labor, it will be a kind of irreparable loss to the humanity. So irrespective of the level of development of the country, the social development or economic development, the worst forms of child labor need to be addressed. And what are the worst forms of child labor? Children in armed conflict. Out of hunger, they are trafficked or they are lured into making all kind of promises. The traffickers take them when parents feel that they will be die of hunger and starvation. It is better that they look upon the trafficker as someone who is a savior and messiah who is going to help them help their children. And always the trafficker promises them that the children are going to be provided with education and food and clothing, but children are trafficked into trafficked and pushed into all kind of situations of work and in illicit activities. In very many places, children are used for trafficking drugs, and they are pushed into enslaved forms of labor. Then they are also used in armed conflict, which gives a kind of traumatic situation for the children when they see violence and killing at the very young age. They are seriously affected. And when children are pushed into prostitution and pornography, when their dignity is bereft, and they are affected terribly. And very many studies also show it is the hunger which pushes them into this kind of situation. They are in bondage, in stone quarries, in brick kilns, and very many places which are non-conducive for children. They are forced into slavery and other forms of labor. And the World Economic Forum, the COVID Action Platform, very recent report says when there is a lowering of income because of the crop failure, when the income fell 10%, child labor increased more than 5%. That is a kind of dangerous signal. And then the UN report also says 66 million more children could fall into extreme poverty and hunger because of the COVID pandemic disaster, adding to already existing 385 million children as per the estimates of extreme poverty in 2019. Then a survey by World Vision also reports that 110 million children are going hungry, and 8 million children are pushed into child labor because parents have lost income, and they could not provide food for their children. So therefore they are pushed into kind of child labor. And this is the kind of situation that we have over 73 million children who are in the age of 5 to 11 years, and 42 million 12 to 14 years, 37 million 15 to 17 years, and over 25% of children are in hazardous occupation. Those who are in hazardous occupation and worst forms of child labor are less than 12 years, which we can see the tender age, how they are pushed into. And then some of the countries faced closure and lockdowns, and when the adults and the adult family members lost their job, and when all their savings have been spent out, and they could not go out to work, or when there is no opportunity of earning their livelihood, there is hunger and food shortage, and it was also, there's a growth of inequality in income. And whenever the parents when children asked for food, parents got frustrated, and there is violence against children which are reported. And the worst affected are the impoverished, the vulnerable social groups who are in disadvantaged position, those who are illiterates, because very many centuries they have been deprived of education, right to education, and indigenous and tribal groups living in remoted regions of the remoted and scattered regions, who are marginalized, excluded, and socially discriminated. Then communities also face a wide scale of discrimination, even if they are good at work, just because they belong to a particular caste or believe in certain faith, or they belong to a tribal region or rural region. Because of the discrimination, they could not get into jobs. So when the adults do not have job, children are pushed into work, all kind of worst forms, mines and where there are incurable diseases like asbestosis. When they work in glass industry, then silicosis, then pneumoconiosis, then dermatitis if they constantly touch the chemicals and try to clean, or when they polish the gems, their fingers get grazed, and there's a direct linkage, because when their brains are starved of vital nutrients, then children who are hungry, when they go empty stomach to schools, they're not able to concentrate on what is taught. So there is failure in school, they drop out and join the labor force, further perpetuating poverty and hunger. And then there also not only food, but also the non-food items are deprived, and that results in poor health, different kind of suffering, and slow progress in education or educational deprivation. And it actually comes in the way of mental, physical, moral, and psychological development, which where when children work separated from their parents, handling dangerous chemicals, and when they are at work, working for long hours, for low wages, in situations damaging to their health. And very often they are provided with the required food. They go to bed hunger. Bed in the sense it may be a kind of a sack or some gunny bags which are given when they sleep underneath some staircase or so. Then when they don't have food supply to eat throughout the year, and when they don't have anything to purchase because of low income, or when there is acute health crisis in the family, the historical exclusion also resulted in assetlessness due to political ecology. Because yesterday one of my colleagues, he's a economic geographer, he was sharing, then even if they have the marginal and small landholders, they could not cultivate because of the political ecology. Normally, when there is a forest region, then there's a buffer region, and then the farms, village farms. When the buffer regions are taken up for commercialization, then monkeys and other pigs, wild pigs and all that, they come directly into the village and affect the farm. So there is a crop failure. And the study which I have done in Virudhunagar district of Sivakashi also shows that the cultivable land where there's a very good water table, the irrigation development was not extended to that region, basically creating poverty, so that they will leave their land and native place and search for work, and they land up in match and fireworks industry, who again act up. They provide some advance, and they give a kind of temporary camp, temporary shelter with the tin sheets and tarpaulin. Then, because it was raised 19 times in the Legislative Assembly, but it was turned down because irrigation development happens in that place, then probably they would not migrate. They would, because that place was potential enough to give 3 times harvest a year, but it was purposely neglected for development, so that there is a constant influx of cheap labor, including child labor, in all worst forms, and very many deaths happen because of the cracker, and the children, they only eyes could be seen because the entire body is covered by gunpowder, which goes into the making of the firecrackers. In addition to that, all the rain and hailstorm, which flatten their crops, hardly anything to fill the hunger of the little ones. And what happens if we don't address the hunger of these children? They will enter into worst forms of child labor. They'll be forced into worst forms of child labor and enslaved forms of child labor, and early aging, because they lead prematurely adult lives. And all the joy of childhood. I mean, we see children in our own homes. Every time we wait for them to speak the first word, we wait for them to take the first step, and we wait for them to perform in schools and excel in their hobbies. And these children who are pushed into worst forms of child labor due to hunger, they lose all the excitement and joy and opportunities of childhood, and their energy get dissipated because of working for long hours. The kind of posture with which they work, be it beady industry, constantly inhaling the tobacco dust, or when they clean the intestines of the animals, slaughtered animals, which goes for producing disposable sutures, or in a gem polishing industry, or when they do all kind of, like in slate mines, when they inhale and get it exposes them to occupational diseases, which are very many of them are incurable. The rat picking children pick up the waste, the leftovers which are thrown into the dustbin, be it pickle or the bread which are partially fungus affected. And when the dump site, when the trucks come to dump, children run to out of hunger if they could fetch something. And and quench the hunger. And since these children belong to families and they are malnourished, they live in ill ventilated, ill illuminated houses, and they work in places which are unhygienic. They don't have the resistance, but die a silent death without getting noticed. They are not counted, they are not accounted for rehabilitation, and they get all kind of infection. And if it is not addressed, then there is eventual loss of childhood, no youth for them, and no adulthood, because by then they become invalid and bedridden, and affected by chronic diseases or terminal illness. Then how do we address it? Because in India, there is a decline in poverty rate between 2000 and 2018. And this is the kind of decline. And it's basically due to, and it's again a similar kind of decline between 15 to 24 years, basically because of several state and non-state interventions and initiatives. One could see the drastic, initially there is a kind of a gradual process, then later on it really picked up. I want to just give an example, ending children's hunger. There's another colleague who has done her PhD on this Kudumbashri experiment in Kerala. And whenever there is a child labor situation, we always tell her to how it successfully they could end hunger. It's an initiative. I mean, it's the right forum to talk about, because this initiative is in the field of rural development and financial inclusion. There's no discrimination based on the social group that they belong to, and it's primarily battle against malnutrition. And I think some of the experts talked about the rural poor and urban poor. This particular program evolves criteria. They have evolved criteria for selection of the beneficiaries, and by using this criteria, they select the urban poor and rural poor. And then with the state poverty eradication mission, they do the initiative of production and distribution, taking home ration, which is a nutrimix. Maybe you can Google and see how how it is produced, how the wheat are procured from the Food Corporation of India, how the individual units, they are given loan for preparation of this take-home ration. This is basically this ICDS, Integrated Child Development Scheme supervisor. Panchayat is basically the local self-government in India, which is called the PRI, so the Panchayat Raj institution. Then this Nutrimix popularity has increased over the years. It started way back in 2006. Then the quality is standardized by surprise visit, making surprise visit. Then they try to meet the demand with adequate supply depending on the number of children, and reaching out to them at the doorstep even during the pandemic time. This is how they do it. At the district level, they do the procurement. Then the subsidized cost, the wheat is supplied as a part of the wheat-based nutrition program. Then the consortium also facilitate bulk procurement of other raw material which goes into the take-home ration. Then the unit is set up with some of the self-help groups, the women. They have their own storage, processing and packaging facility, and they are tested for balanced nutrient which goes into it. And then the production is also carried out as per the standard operating procedure set in. Then it is distributed to Anganwadis, that is the child care centers. The payment is given by the local self-government through the Integrated Child Development Scheme supervisor. And this is how they distribute, they collect the Nutrimix. Then the wheat is procured. Then they start production. Then nicely pack it, and the Anganwadi teachers, the workers, they reach out it to the children in their respective place. A few policy recommendation, because Dr. Jayanta has given a beautiful structure for presentation. Then this could be, if this kind of experiment can be carried out as a replicable model anywhere in the world, so that children get accessibility to food free of cost, and they are saved from hunger. Then there is a coordinated policy effort. It should not be only the child welfare department or child care department. It needs every citizen to participate and support such ventures. This is a photograph which is of yesterday, where this team of National Child Labor Project, they go, because almost every day I'm in touch with them. They go around locating children who are hungry, and then try to reach out the rations to them. I have put some of those photographs which are of last week. Then the states, the government should prioritize effort to continue education for all children, because education is also an opportunity to provide them with midday meals. And school should educational institution should ensure that every poor child get free lunches. And especially the orphan children should be located, because I do know during the COVID time, some of the I came to know some of the children, they frequently going to this special training centers, which are part of the right of children to free and compulsory education. Then somebody asked, the children are so keen to learn that they try to go to school, the special training centers. Then when asked, the children said, no, we want to come to school, so that, because now we are extremely hungry, we don't have anything to eat. It is 3 days since we ate anything. So we just came if there are the midday meals is served. That is the kind of situation. And there are, during the COVID time, also case where the only work available was collecting, the rat picking and scavenging. The children are, we know that the height are very less, especially children from poor background, and from the socio-economic marginalized classes. They picked up all the medical waste, the mass and other, and tried to sell it out when they were not getting sufficient money to have food or provide food for their younger siblings, or very old and sick parents. Then they went to distant places to collect bottles, liquor bottles, which fetch higher money when they sell it to the one who collects waste, who are part of the waste management. Further, these children, they whatever leftover liquor, they started drinking, and then get into all kind of problems. And some of the children also got into a kind of deserted borewell, and cut the copper wire to sell, so that they have adequate money for providing food for the family and for themselves. So we need to promote micro technology so that the income earning potential is increased in micro and small scale enterprises and the informal sector region. And slowly informal employment with low remuneration should move to formal employment with higher remuneration, so that poverty and hunger could be addressed. Then universalization of social protection and provision of basic social security needs, and universal basic minimum income should be assured. And the credit should be, because very many times microfinance could be a reason when the poor women could get together. And we have a lot to learn from the Bangladesh experiment of Professor Yunus. So that really helps in poverty reduction and ending hunger. Then relevant policy formulation is required, evolving more informed interventions, because what is important, even the World Development Report, the concept note very clearly says how the data could be used for attaining is sustainable development goals. So informed intervention, replicable models, focusing on women education. We know we are also facing declining female labor force participation. When women have their own earnings and autonomy, their earned income, they participate in decision making, and when they have their own earned income, the priority, the study shows, very many studies, that the priority is health and education of children. They provide food for the children. Women's education is vital so that they could get into higher paid income. Thereby, they would be able to provide food for their
Dr.
children.
Helen, Dr. Helen, please make it shorter, please. Just give
Yeah,
the key
yeah.
points only.
Yes. So the minimum basic income, and this is how, like, every department should get together, every social partner. So before I conclude, this photo really touches the heart. This 1994, the Pulitzer Prize winner, Kevin Carter, he took from a Sudan famine kind of situation. In fact, no one knows about what happened to the child. This is a kind of this is something which has to remind us how the importance of ending hunger. Thank you so much for your patient listening, and looking forward to respond to questions if there are any.